This week we are looking at chordophones, specifically the violin. A chordophone, as you may recall, is a musical instrument that makes sound by way of a vibrating string or strings stretched between 2 points. The most famous violins come from the Italian city of Cremona during the 16th and 17th centuries. That's when most of the details about how to make violins were codified and made standard. The person that gets kind of the credit for creating the modern family of four-stringed violin-shaped instruments around 1555 is Andrea Amati. However, the most recognized and greatest violin maker of all time, there's some debate over this, but most people would agree that it's Antonio Stradivari. The Stradivarius violin is considered the standard by which all others are measured. A person who builds and maintains or repairs string instruments is called a luthier. The difference between most orchestral string instruments and, say, a guitar is they don't have frets. Okay, there's nothing to stop the string other than your finger. So the intonation really matters as to where you put your finger. The modern violin bow with the convex shape came from a man named Francois Tort, French guy. Before that, the Baroque bows were bowed the other way. Kind of interesting. When you play two notes at the same time on a violin, it's called a double stop. When you do it on a guitar, it's called a chord. On most orchestral string instruments, so double stops. Most violin strings, until the advent of modern metal strings, were actually made of sheep intestines. They called it catgut, but it was actually the intestines of a sheep. Strings on a violin are tuned a fifth apart, low to high, G, D, A, and E. So 4 strings tuned a fifth apart. Okay, we have a short video for you here about the history of the violin, and then we're going to listen to a great recording of Jascha Heifetz playing a Paganini Caprice. So here's a little bit on the history of the violin.
The first violins emerged in northern Italy in the early 16th century or 1500s. From 1530, the word violin begins to appear in documents spread all around northern Italy. While no instruments from the first decades of the century survive, there are several representations in paintings. String instruments of approximately 300 years of age, especially those made by Stradivari and Guarneri, are the most sought-after instruments for both collectors and performers. In addition to the skill and reputation of the maker, an instrument's age can also influence both price and quality. A person who makes or repairs string instruments is called a luthier, or simply a violin or instrument maker. Some of the most famous luthiers lived between the early 16th and 18th centuries and included the Amati family of violin makers, the Guarneri family of violin makers, and Antonio Stradivari. The parts of a string instrument are usually made from different types of wood. 3 types of wood that are the most common in violin making are spruce for the top, maple for the back and the scroll, and ebony for the fingerboard, pegs, and tailpiece. Typically, the top, or the instrument's soundboard, is made of quarter-sawn spruce, book-matched at a strongly glued joint down the center with 2 sound holes, or F-holes, from their resemblance to the stylized letter F, precisely placed between the C-bouts and the lower corners. The sound holes allow the box to breathe as it vibrates. A decorative inlaid set of 3 narrow wooden strips, called purfling, runs around the edge of the top, and it is said to give some resistance to cracks originating at the edge. It is also claimed to allow the top to flex more independently of the rib structure. The back and ribs are typically made of maple, most often with a matching striped figure called flame. Backs may be one piece or a book-matched two-piece quarter sawn. Backs are also purfled, but in their case, their purfling is less structurally important than for the top. Some fine old violins have scribed or painted rather than inlaid purfling on the back. The neck is usually maple, with a flame figure compatible with that of the back and ribs. It carries the fingerboard, typically made of ebony, but often in less expensive instruments, some other wood is used by staining or painting black. Ebony is considered the preferred material because of its hardness, beauty, and superior resistance to wear. Some very old violins were made with maple fingerboards carrying a veneer of ebony. The scroll at the end of the peg box provides essential mass to tune the fundamental body resonance of the instrument and provides a convenient grip for spare fingers to brace against when tuning one-handed with the violin on the shoulder. Some scrolls are carved representations of animal or human heads instead of the classical spiral shape normally seen. How high can the price of a violin go? Well, there is no limit. Despite the Amati family being the world's first violin makers, many of the violins that dominated the world's most expensive violins list are Stradivari and Guarneri instruments. High wood quality, unique designs, pleasant tones, varnish, finishes, and the fame of being played by celebrated violin virtuosos across the world are some of the factors which made them expensive. Next are some of the most expensive violins in the world.
Okay, that's a little bit of history about the violin. Now here is Jascha Heifetz playing the Paganini Caprice number 24. Put your seatbelt on.
before a concert ends, Heifetz has himself become an instrument on which the audience plays.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. He's amazing. Okay, there's one more. Next week, we're going to look at the glass harmonica, which is an idiophone. We will see you then. Bye-bye.